The rain over New York City was not a gentle mist. It was a relentless, icy downpour that turned the glittering skyscrapers into blurred giants and the streets into rushing black rivers. It was a rain that felt personal, as if it had singled out Ana Morales to test her resolve. She pulled the thin, worn collar of her coat tighter, a futile gesture against the damp chill that had already seeped into her bones. Her hands, raw and chapped from a long day of cleaning offices, were shoved deep into her pockets, clutching the meager cash from her last shift. Each step in her worn-out sneakers was a squelching reminder of the distance between this life and the one she had imagined. Her face, usually softened by a kind, patient smile, was now a mask of exhaustion, her dark eyes reflecting the gray, indifferent city. She missed the sun-baked hills of Cusco, the vibrant colors of the market, the sound of Quechua whispers in the wind. Here, the world was a symphony of honking cars and hurried footsteps, a language of constant motion she was still struggling to learn. She was invisible, another shadow moving through the concrete canyons, her dreams feeling as distant as the stars hidden behind the storm clouds. Her small basement apartment in Queens was her sanctuary and her prison, a damp, single room that held the lingering scent of other people's lives, a constant reminder of her own transience. But within her, beneath the fatigue, burned a quiet, unyielding fire, a resilience passed down from her abuelita, who had weathered harder storms than this. Ana focused on the thought of the rent money in her pocket, the simple act of survival. It was enough for today. It had to be. She turned a corner, the wind whipping a sheet of cold water into her face. She blinked it away, and that's when she saw her. A figure, hunched and motionless, slumped against the wet brick wall of a closed bodega, partially obscured by an overflowing dumpster. It was a woman, her expensive-looking coat soaked through, her head bowed. People hurried past, umbrellas acting as blinders, their gazes averted. The city's unwritten rule. Don't stop, don't get involved. Anna's own feet hesitated for a moment, the voice of caution screaming in her head. Asterisk, keep walking. You have nothing to give. You can't afford trouble. Asterisk, but then the woman stirred, letting out a soft, pained whimper that was almost swallowed by the rain. It was a sound of pure, human suffering. And in that moment, Anna saw not a stranger, but her own mother, her own sister, herself on a worse day. The fire of her compassion, a flame that no amount of city rain could extinguish, flared brighter than her fear. Her own struggles faded into the background, replaced by a more immediate primal need. To help. She crossed the street, her footsteps firm against the pavement's plea to hurry home. Señora? Señora, está bien? Anna's voice was soft, a gentle counterpoint to the rain's harsh drumming. She knelt, the cold wetness immediately soaking through the knees of her pants, but she didn't flinch. The woman lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale, etched with lines of pain, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She was older than Anna had first thought, perhaps in her late 50s, with elegant silver streaks in her otherwise dark, matted hair. My ankle, the woman stammered, her voice trembling. I slipped. I think it's broken. I can't put any weight on it. Her hand clutched her leg, knuckles white. Anna's gaze dropped to the woman's foot, which was bent at an unnatural angle. A wave of nausea passed through her, but she pushed it down. This was not a time for weakness. It's okay, Anna said, her English careful but clear. You are not alone. I am here. She shrugged off her own cheap, saturated coat, ignoring the immediate bite of the wind, and draped it over the woman's shoulders, on top of the expensive, now-ruined wool coat. It was a small gesture, but the woman's eyes welled with fresh tears, this time of gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking. Everyone just walked by. Anna gave her a small, reassuring smile. The city, it can make people forget to see. She looked up and down the deserted street. No cabs would stop here. An ambulance could take forever, and the cost. She knew the fear of medical bills all too well. A resolve settled in her. My home is close. 4 blocks. I can help you walk. The woman looked terrified. I can't. You can, Anna said, her tone firm yet kind, the same tone she used when her younger cousins back home were scared. We will go slowly. You can lean on me. She positioned herself, wrapping the woman's arm around her own shoulders, and, with a grunt of effort that was swallowed by the rain, she lifted. The woman cried out in pain, her body sagging against Anna's smaller frame. Anna staggered for a moment, her own muscles screaming in protest after her long day. The weight was immense, both physical and emotional. But she locked her knees, gritted her teeth, and took the first step. Then another. And another. It was a slow, agonizing procession through the drowning city. Each step was a negotiation with pain, each pause a moment for the woman, whose name Anna learned was Helen, to catch her breath. Anna talked to her softly, in a mix of Spanish and English, telling her about the healing power of her abuelita's herbal teas, about the stubborn donkeys in the Peruvian highlands, about anything to distract her from the agony of the moment. She was a lone anchor in Helen's storm of pain, her own weariness forgotten in the face of this greater need. The 4 blocks felt like a marathon through a cold, dark ocean. By the time they reached the worn gray steps leading down to her basement apartment, both women were trembling from exhaustion and the biting cold. Anna fumbled with her keys, her numb fingers struggling with the lock before it finally gave way. She pushed the door open, revealing her small, humble home. It was a single room, but it was clean and orderly. A small bed was neatly made with a hand-stitched blanket from Peru. A hot plate and a tiny fridge served as a kitchen. A single, framed photograph of her family sat on a crate that acted as a nightstand. It was a world away from the opulence Helen was likely accustomed to, but in that moment it was a palace, a sanctuary of warmth and light. Anna helped Helen lower herself onto the bed, propping her injured leg up with pillows. "I need to look," Anna said gently. Helen nodded, her face tight with apprehension. With careful, deliberate movements, Anna removed the woman's designer shoe and stocking. The ankle was already swollen and blooming with deep, ugly purple bruises. It was clearly a severe sprain, if not a break. Helen gasped, turning her head away. "It looks worse than it is," Anna lied smoothly, her voice a calm balm. "The color, it is just the blood. We must stop the swelling." She moved with a quiet efficiency born of a life spent making do. She filled a bowl with cold water and ice from her tiny freezer, grabbing a clean, threadbare towel, one of her few possessions. She wrapped the ice in the towel and gently applied it to the swollen joint. Helen flinched, then sighed as the numbing cold began to battle the throbbing heat. Next, Anna boiled water on her hot plate, adding a handful of dried herbs from a small cloth pouch she kept in a tin, Muna, for pain, and manzanilla, for calm. The room began to fill with a fresh, earthy scent, a stark contrast to the wet concrete smell of the city outside. She handed the steaming mug to Helen. "Drink. It will help." Helen took the mug, her hands shaking slightly as she wrapped them around the warmth. She took a sip, her eyes closing for a moment. "It's wonderful," she breathed. She looked around the small room, her gaze lingering on the family photo, the colorful blanket, the few touches of home that Anna had managed to bring with her. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a deep, profound empathy. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. Anna nodded, busying herself with wringing out their wet coats. "It is enough for me." Helen was silent for a long time, sipping the tea, watching Anna move about the room with a quiet grace. The frantic fear from the street had subsided, replaced by a weary, grateful calm. "You're an angel," Helen whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Anna simply smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "No. I am just a person." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside the small basement apartment, a different kind of storm was being weathered, and a fragile, profound connection was being forged in the shared space of vulnerability and kindness. As the herbal tea warmed her from within, and the ice pack numbed the sharpest edges of the pain, Helen seemed to shed the rigid, pained posture of the wealthy woman on the street. She became softer, more present. Her eyes, now clear of their initial shock, held a deep, curious warmth as they followed Anna's movements. "You have a beautiful home," Helen said, her voice sincere. Anna paused, a slight, skeptical smile touching her lips as she hung their dripping coats over the back of a chair. "It is small." "It's filled with you," Helen countered gently, nodding towards the family photograph. "That's what makes it beautiful." That's your family. Anna picked up the framed photo and brought it over, sitting on the edge of the bed. She pointed to a woman with a kind, weathered face and Anna's own dark, smiling eyes. My mother. And my little brother Miguel. And this is my abuelita Elena. Her voice swelled with a love that was almost tangible. She taught me about the herbs. She must be a very wise woman, Helen said. She is. She says the earth provides everything we need to heal, if we only remember to look. The conversation flowed, slowly at first, then more freely. Helen asked about Peru, and Anna's eyes lit up as she described the misty dawn over Machu Picchu, the vibrant Inti Raymi festival, the taste of fresh lucuma. She spoke of her father, a schoolteacher, and her dream of becoming one herself, a dream that felt a million miles away in this city, where she cleaned the offices of people who lived the life she once imagined for herself. In turn, Helen shared fragments of her own life. She was a widow, her husband having passed away 2 years prior. She lived in a large, quiet apartment on the Upper East Side that felt emptier with each passing day. She spoke of a son, David, who was always traveling for business, and the loneliness that had become her constant companion. You spend your life building a family, a home, Helen murmured, staring into her empty mug. And then one day the house is just a house again. And you realize you're invisible, just in a different way. Anna listened, her heart aching with a shared understanding. They were from different worlds, separated by money, privilege, and circumstance. Yet in that moment, they were simply two women connected by a thread of shared loneliness and a newfound fragile trust. The digital clock on Anna's nightstand blinked to 11 p.m. The rain had finally lessened to a gentle patter. Helen's ankle, while still badly swollen, was stable. Anna knew what had to happen next. You cannot go home like this, Anna stated. You will stay here tonight. The bed is for you. Helen began to protest, but Anna was firm. I am used to the floor. It is no problem. Using an old cell phone with a cracked screen, Anna helped Helen call her son. The conversation was brief, Helen reassuring a distant, concerned voice that she was safe, that a kind stranger had taken her in, that she would be home in the morning. She gave Anna's address, her voice firm. When she hung up, she looked at Anna, her eyes glistening. He's sending a car for me in the morning. He thanks you. Anna simply nodded. She laid out a spare blanket and a thin pillow on the floor, creating a small nest for herself. She turned off the main light, leaving only the soft glow from the small kitchen bulb. In the semi-darkness, as they both settled into an uneasy sleep, the world outside their little sanctuary felt very far away. The only sounds were their breathing and the fading whisper of the rain, a quiet testament to the flicker of humanity that had been kindled in the most unlikely of places. The morning sun, pale and tentative, filtered through the single high window of the basement apartment, painting stripes of gold on the concrete floor. Anna woke with a stiff neck and a deep ache in her muscles, a physical reminder of the previous night's ordeal. She had slept lightly, waking often to check on Helen, who had eventually fallen into a deep medicated sleep. Now, Helen was still asleep, her breathing even, her face peaceful in the soft light. Anna moved quietly, starting a pot of coffee on the hot plate, the real, strong Peruvian coffee she saved for special occasions. The rich, bitter aroma began to fill the room, mingling with the lingering scent of the medicinal herbs. As she waited for the coffee to brew, she looked at Helen. In the clear light of day, she could see the fine lines of a life lived, the elegance that even sleep and pain could not erase. This was a woman of a world Anna only knew from movies and the offices she cleaned. A flicker of anxiety passed through her. Would this woman, once back in her own life, even remember her? Or would Anna become a vague, pleasant story, the nice immigrant girl, who helped her one rainy night? The thought brought a pang of a strange, hollow sadness. It wasn't that she expected a reward. The genuine gratitude in Helen's eyes had been more than enough. It was something else, a longing for the connection to not be severed, for the thread of humanity they had spun to not be so easily broken by the return to normalcy. Helen stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked disoriented, then her gaze found Anna, and a warm, relieved smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she said, her voice raspy with sleep. "How is your ankle?" Anna asked, bringing her a cup of water. Helen shifted carefully, wincing. Still painful, but much better than last night. Thanks to you. Anna helped her sit up and brought her a cup of the strong coffee. Helen took a sip, her eyes widening in appreciation. This is incredible. They shared a simple breakfast of toast, and the last of Anna's mango. The dynamic had shifted subtly. The crisis was over. The practicalities of the day were upon them. A black town car, sleek and silent, pulled up outside the basement apartment precisely at 9 a.m. A uniformed driver knocked politely on the door. It was time. Anna helped Helen to the door, letting the woman lean on her once more for the short journey. At the doorway, Helen turned, her eyes searching Anna's face. She took both of Anna's hands in her own. Her hands were soft, a contrast to Anna's work-roughened ones. Anna, Helen said, her voice thick with emotion. I can never, ever thank you enough. You saved me. In more ways than one. She squeezed Anna's hands. I will see you again. I promise. Anna nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Take care of your ankle, Helen. She watched as the driver carefully helped Helen into the plush interior of the car. The door closed with a soft, solid thud. The window rolled down, and Helen gave a final, small wave before the car pulled away, merging into the relentless flow of the city. Anna stood on the steps for a long time, the cold seeping through her thin socks. The apartment behind her felt emptier than it ever had before. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was profound. She had done a good thing, a human thing. But as she turned and went back inside, closing the door on the world, she couldn't shake the feeling that a beautiful brief dream had ended, leaving the stark reality of her life feeling just a little bit grayer. The rest of Anna's Saturday passed with a strange, hollow monotony. She cleaned her small apartment, the tasks feeling more mundane than ever. She did her laundry in the building's dank basement, the mechanical hum of the machines a poor substitute for the human connection of the previous night. The memory of Helen's grateful smile, the warmth of their conversation, played over and over in her mind like a cherished film. It had felt real, their connection genuine. But as the day wore on, the cynical voice she'd learned to cultivate in this city began to whisper. She was in shock. She was grateful in the moment. People like her don't stay connected to people like you. She tried to push the thoughts away, focusing on her textbook for the online English composition class she was taking. But the words blurred on the page. Her phone, a cheap, prepaid device, remained silent. What had she expected? A call? A text? It was foolish. Their worlds had touched for a moment, a cosmic accident, and now they had returned to their separate orbits. Sunday morning arrived, bright and clear, the city washed clean by the storm. Anna had a shift cleaning a corporate law firm in Midtown. The work was physically demanding, vacuuming vast, carpeted plains, wiping down acres of glass and polished wood, scrubbing bathrooms that gleamed with sterile opulence. As she worked, invisible and silent, she thought of Helen. Did she work in a place like this? Was she now resting in a spacious apartment, her ankle propped up, telling the story of her strange adventure? Anna's co-worker, Maria, an older woman from Ecuador, noticed her quiet preoccupation. ¿Estás bien, mija? You seem far away. Anna simply smiled and nodded. Just tired. She didn't mention Helen. The story felt too fragile, too precious to share, and part of her feared that speaking it aloud would break its magic. The shift ended and Anna, bone-tired once more, began the long subway ride back to Queens. The train car was crowded, a jostling capsule of tired faces and muffled sounds. She leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, watching the dark tunnels fly by. She thought about her mother's last letter, asking when she would come home for a visit. She thought about the ever-mounting stack of bills on her crate nightstand. She thought about the vast, indifferent machine of the city, and her tiny, insignificant place within it. The kindness she had shown Helen felt like a single lit match in an enormous dark cavern. It had provided a moment of warmth and light, but the darkness had quickly swallowed it again. She got off at her stop and trudged up the stairs to the street level, the familiar weight of her life settling back onto her shoulders. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the brick buildings of her neighborhood. She walked the familiar route home, her body moving on autopilot, her mind already in her damp apartment, already planning her simple dinner, already bracing for the week ahead. The extraordinary interlude was over. Life, in all its difficult, predictable rhythm, was calling her back. She turned the corner onto her street, her head down, her thoughts a million miles away. She did not see the car parked in front of her building immediately. It was only when she was a few feet away, fumbling in her bag for her keys, that she looked up. And then she stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Parked directly in front of the steps to her basement apartment was the same sleek, black town car from the previous morning. Leaning against its side was a man, tall and well-dressed in a sharp dark overcoat. He was young, perhaps in his early 30s, with an air of quiet authority. But it was the person sitting in a wheelchair on the sidewalk next to him that made Anna's heart stop. It was Helen. She was bundled in a warm blanket, her injured leg extended, but her face was radiant, lit up with a smile that could rival the setting sun. Her eyes locked with Anna's, and in them was not just gratitude, but a profound, excited joy. "Anna!" Helen called out, her voice clear and strong. Anna stood frozen, her keys clutched tightly in her hand, her bag hanging limply from her shoulder. She felt a rush of emotions, shock, confusion, and a wild, blooming hope. The tall man stepped forward, his expression serious but not unkind. He had Helen's eyes. This was David. "Anna Morales?" he asked, his voice calm and respectful. Anna could only nod, her gaze flickering between him and his beaming mother. "I'm David," he said, confirming her guess. "Helen's son. We spoke briefly on the phone." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Anna shook it. His grip was firm, warm. I don't understand," Anna stammered, finally finding her voice. "Is everything okay? Is your ankle worse, Helen?" Helen laughed, a light, happy sound that seemed to dance in the evening air. "No, my dear. Quite the opposite. Thanks to you, I'm on the mend." She gestured to her son. "But we're not here just for a social call. Although that is a very large part of it." David's demeanor was intense, his gaze focused on Anna. "Anna, what you did for my mother. The doctor said if she had been left out in that cold with that injury, it could have been much more serious. You didn't just help her, you likely saved her from pneumonia or worse. You took a stranger into your home, showed her incredible kindness, and asked for nothing in return." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "My mother has told me everything. About your kindness, your compassion, your dream of being a teacher." Anna's cheeks flushed. She looked down at her worn sneakers, suddenly feeling exposed. "I only did what anyone would do," she murmured, the words feeling inadequate. "But no one else did," Helen said softly, her voice filled with conviction. "Only you, Anna. Only you." David took another step closer. "Anna, we've spent the last 24 hours not just arranging for my mother's care, but also looking into a few things. We wanted to understand who the angel was who saved my mother." Anna's heart began to pound. What did he mean, looking into a few things? A cold dread mixed with her confusion. What had they found? Her immigration status? Her financial struggles? The world seemed to tilt slightly. The kindness felt like it was about to curdle into something else, something complicated and frightening. The air on the quiet Queen Street grew thick with tension. Anna's mind raced, conjuring fears of legal complications, of well-intentioned but disastrous interference. David seemed to sense her sudden panic. His expression softened. "Please don't be alarmed," he said, his voice gentle. "What we have to tell you, well, it's a story my mother insisted on sharing. A story about her past." He looked at Helen, who gave him an encouraging nod. Helen's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Anna, when I told you I felt invisible, it was the truth. But it wasn't always that way. A long, long time ago, before I was Helen the widow from the Upper East Side, I was someone else entirely." She took a shaky breath. "I was born in Lima. My name was Elena." The name hung in the air between them. Xinghao, Elena Xinghao. Anna's abuelita's name. A common name surely, but the way Helen said it, with such poignant weight, made Anna's blood run cold. She stared, unable to speak, unable to breathe. Helen continued, her voice a soft, emotional whisper. My family was very poor. When I was 19, I met a young American journalist. We fell in love. He had to return to the States, and he wanted to marry me, to bring me with him. My family, they disowned me. They said I was abandoning them, chasing a fantasy. The day I left for the airport, my mother told me I was dead to her. A single tear traced a path down Helen's cheek. I was heartbroken, but I was also young and in love. I came here. I built a life. I became Helen. I learned the language, I adapted. My husband was a good man, and we had a wonderful life. But I never stopped missing my home. I never stopped feeling the guilt of leaving. After my husband died, the loneliness was crushing. That emptiness you saw in me, Anna. It's an old emptiness. It's the emptiness of a displaced person. Anna felt the world shift on its axis. The wealthy, elegant woman in the wheelchair was sharing a history that mirrored her own in its roots of sacrifice and loss. The chasm between their worlds suddenly seemed like an illusion. Why are you telling me this? Anna whispered, her own voice trembling. It was David who answered, his own emotions barely contained. Because when my mother described you, your kindness, your spirit, and your name Morales, she had to know. We had to be sure. He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound notebook. It was very old. He opened it carefully to a page marked by a faded ribbon. On the page was a black and white photograph, carefully glued in place. It showed a young, beautiful woman with dark, smiling eyes, standing with a young man in a Peruvian village square. The woman was unmistakably a young Helen. And standing next to her, his arm around her, was a man whose face Anna knew from her own family photographs. Her heart slammed against her ribs. It was her own abuelito, her mother's father. Helen's voice was barely a breath. The man in that picture with me, his name was Carlos Morales. He was my brother. The revelation hit Anna with the force of a physical blow. She staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. The city sounds faded into a dull roar. Helen, the woman she had saved, was her. Tia! Anna choked out, the word a prayer, a question, a miracle. You are my great-aunt. For a long, suspended moment, there was only silence on the street, broken by the distant siren and the frantic beating of Anna's own heart. She stared at Helen, at her Tia Elena, seeing her with entirely new eyes. The elegant silver in her hair now mirrored the silver in her mother's. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. It was all there, a family resemblance she had been too overwhelmed to see before. The random act of kindness on a rainy night had not been random at all. It had been a cosmic correction, a thread of fate pulling two lost pieces of the same tapestry back together. Carlos was my older brother, Helen explained, her voice thick with a lifetime of unshed tears. He was the only one who supported me when I left. He secretly gave me his blessing. We wrote letters for a few years, but then, life, distance, it all became too much. The connection was lost. After my husband died, I tried to find my family again. I hired people, but Peru had changed, records were lost. All I had was his name and the memory of our village. When you told me your last name was Morales, and you were from Cusco, my heart stopped. And when you showed me that photograph, I knew. I just knew. Anna finally found her legs moving. She stumbled forward and fell to her knees in front of the wheelchair, not in supplication, but in awe. She took Helen's hands again, and this time, the touch was electric, a current of shared history and bloodline passing between them. Abuelito Carlos, Anna whispered, tears now streaming freely down her face. My mother, she still talks about her Tia Elena. She said you were the bravest person she knew. She has a box of your old letters. The dam of Helen's composure broke. She sobbed, a deep cleansing sound of release, and pulled Anna into a tight, desperate embrace. They held each other, two women from different generations, different worlds, bound by blood and reunited by an act of unconditional kindness. David watched, his own eyes glistening, a proud, moved smile on his face. He had not just found the woman who saved his mother. He had found a cousin, a piece of his mother's soul that had been missing for decades. The story was more profound and beautiful than any of them could have imagined. The mystery of the night was solved, not with a simple reward, but with the gift of identity, of belonging, of family. The invisible immigrant and the lonely widow were invisible, and lonely no more. They had found a home in each other, a home that transcended apartments and countries, a home built in the heart. They talked until the stars came out, right there on the sidewalk, oblivious to the occasional passerby. The story unfolded in a torrent of shared memories and filled in blanks. Helen spoke of her life in New York, of her son David's childhood, of the husband who had always encouraged her to find her roots. Anna spoke of her mother, of Miguel, of the financial struggles that had forced her to leave her studies and come to this daunting city, in search of a better future for them all. The narrative of her difficult life, which had felt so heavy and solitary, was now woven into a larger, grander family story. It had meaning. Her struggles were not in vain. They were the path that led her to this very moment, to this miraculous reunion. David, who was a partner in a successful investment firm, listened intently. He wasn't just hearing a family history. He was seeing a clear, pressing need. "Anna," he said, his voice firm with decision, "your dream is to be a teacher. That ends today." Anna looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," David said, "that as a family we take care of our own. And you have been taking care of yourself and now our mother, for far too long alone. Your tuition, your living expenses, they are taken care of. You will finish your degree. Not as a burden, but as your right. As our privilege to help you." The offer was so immense, so life-altering, that Anna could not process it. She shook her head. I cannot accept that. It is too much." "Nonsense," Helen said, her voice regaining its strength. She cupped Anna's face in her hands. "Mija, you gave me back my life in more ways than one. You gave me back my family. Let us give you back your future. This is not charity. This is love." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Anna moved out of the damp basement apartment and into a bright, clean studio apartment that David owned, refusing to take rent. Her classes were paid for in full. But more valuable than the financial support was the emotional anchor she had gained. Helen, with David's help, arranged a video call with Anna's mother in Peru. The sight of her mother and her long-lost aunt weeping and laughing together was a joy so pure it felt sacred. Plans were immediately made for a family reunion in Cusco the following summer. Anna's life was transformed, not by a lottery win, but by the rediscovery of her own bloodline, triggered by a simple, human act of looking when others chose to turn away. She continued her studies, but now with a fire and confidence she had never known. She was no longer just Anna the immigrant cleaner. She was Ana Morales, future teacher, beloved niece, cherished cousin. She was a vital branch on a family tree that had been split by time and circumstance, now grafted back together, stronger than ever. The rainy night that had begun with such cold despair had ended up leading her to the warmest dawn of her life. And it all started with a choice, a moment of empathy in the pouring rain, a reminder that the greatest surprises life has to offer are often hidden within the simplest acts of kindness, waiting for the right heart to unveil them.